So the second part of the workshop is going to focus on the present. So Kat very kindly did the past. Remy Savage over here is going to be talking about the present of cocktails. We could talk about kind of like accolades, where he's been, what he's done, who he's met, all his friends along the way, including his best friends, myself and Kenny. But I think to share like a very personal story, and because it's come up a few times about this idea of how would you write your resume, recently Remy wrote his resume and talked about where he started in Johnny's Kitchen, then the work that he did at Little Red Door, but now I know him as my best friend, collaborator, and actually someone who is an owner of multiple different projects, movements, not just 6 bars, and not only Baguette 3000. But I think he's someone who is really molding this idea of that you can always be learning. Someone who today sat next to me and said, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've opened 6 bars and I still haven't done this yet. I think it's really, really awesome to see someone within our industry who is still taking that continuous edge to learn, to still talk about the present, to share what he's done, but also to share what the idea is. And I think every time that Remy does a talk, a lot of people ask him about his past. They constantly ask him, how did you make this drink? Why did you do this menu? And I think those questions are so important, but I think we could always ask a little bit more of, what do you think you're going to do? How are you going to expand your box? So I would really love to introduce my dearest, Remy Savage.
And Remy. I have written a little note for you quickly. Today, the closest to him have become his chosen family. He is a husband, a father, and though he stands at the forefront of modern mixology, a savant in his field, an award-winning innovator, he would give it up all in a second to protect the people he loves. Mr. Remy Savage, I love you with all my heart. Please. Bon courage.
I have never met these people. How is everybody? Good? Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you for your continued attention today. I know we're talking about a lot of stuff. And again, truly it's a pleasure to be here, 4th year, with Tony, with the guys, with all of you. I think it was said, Indra said today that I knew all of you. Sadly, I don't yet, but I'm looking forward dancing tonight. I was given the interesting task of discussing the present. Now, funnily enough, very much like time, the past is infinite, the future is infinite, but present just lasts a second, not even, right? So the complexity of the topic is huge, and I think that what Kat brilliantly touched on early on was more this idea of classic drinks and the way that it worked, and the difficulty, I think, and the way that this kind of shaped it out to be was more for me to be able to talk about kind of what changed between what Kat was talking about and what we are experiencing now. In reality, there's a few different segments that are interesting, but first and foremost, it is such a pleasure to be here in the home of Jameson. And I think I wouldn't be a decent co-host to Tony if I didn't bring a surprise. So I had to go and fight my way in the archives of Bar Nouveau and call a few vintage spirit guys. And I have found for us to share one bottle from the 50s. Good, it's empty, that you will have the pleasure of discussing them. As I'm completely underqualified myself, I have the great pleasure of being accompanied today by Eric, who's a distiller from 2010, a great collectioner of vintage Irish spirits and other whiskies, and other spirits. Somebody has tasted over 1,000 different vintage liquids, and he's going to walk us through the difference in products and the difference of liquid between something that you might have experienced in the early 1950s to Jameson Original today. So please join me in clapping to welcome Eric today. How do you do?
Very good, very good. So I will need a glass first of all, because as you can see, we've got this bottle, which is a great find because in Ireland back in the 1950s, you couldn't find this bottle. This is an export bottle. And from 1932, Jameson bottled for the first time in London. So they distilled in Dublin, they sent it over to London, and they bottled their Jameson 3-star 7-year-old and their Jameson 12-year-old, which this is, in London. It wasn't until 1964 that Jameson started bottling in Ireland. Previous to that, the only way you could get Jameson was via publicans, via wine merchants, and via whiskey bonders. So they would send their casks to to Bow Street Distillery in Dublin and get them filled with Jameson whiskey, and those are the guys that would eventually sell it at retail. So it's very nice to find this. I'm just going to pour a little drop in here. And the brief I've been asked is to kind of compare the two and why do they taste different.
Right here.
Yeah, you got one for me. So that's the... So just maybe say a little bit about Bow Street. Bow Street, going back to 1780. Last distillation in Bow Street was in 1970, June of 1970. And all through that time, it was produced in virtually the same manner. So the nice thing about this 1950s, I know there was some work done in the 1960s on the plant with regard to, removing old stills, maybe making the place more efficient. So you're actually tasting something that is almost like 19th century. So it was made the same way in the 1800s as it was in the 1950s. And how that was made was, it was a single pot still whiskey, as we call it today, which is basically made via the traditional copper pot stills. Back then, back in the 19th century, back in the 1950s, Jameson was, as a mash bill, barley, which is unmalted, malted barley, which we call malt, but there was also a little bit of wheat and some oats. So that's what you have in this. That's your mash bill. That's different to today. Today, we're in the plant in Middleton here where I work, it's malted barley and unmalted barley. So that's the first thing. The second thing is in the fermentation, which would have been quite different. They had wooden washbacks, as we call them, but washbacks are fermenters. Today we use stainless steel. That has its, it gives you a different variety of flavors. They would have done a low temperature fermentation, whereas we do a high temperature fermentation. What that means is we bring it in and we let it go to 30 degrees and we try and maintain that temperature during fermentation. We do that by cooling. We have cooling coils around the outside of the stills. As well as that, we do long fermentations today. Back then they did a bit shorter. So what we're looking for is a fruity, floral, fragrant wash that goes on into the stills. What Jameson would have, in my opinion, would have been a bit more spicy and not as fruity. And then when we got to the still house, that's where you see a difference as well. Back in the 1950s, for this, and going back to the 19th century, Jameson had direct fired stills, which meant you had the coal fires underneath the stills, and that's how you got your heat into the liquid. And that can give you a different flavour profile. And the reason for that is you might have heard of Maillard reactions. Maillard reactions basically are when you have sugars and you have proteins and you have high temperature. And you get these things called Maillard reactions, and they create flavours, nice flavours if you do it right. So, for example, barbecued meats, Maillard reactions give you some of those lovely flavours, kind of a sweet, kind of aromatics. It's the same with baked bread, gets a lot of its flavours from Maillard reactions. I'm trying to think of anything else, but you get the idea. And it's the same with when you do direct fired, you get more of these Maillard reactions. And the reason for that is when you have the heat at the bottom, there's still some parts of it, it's not evenly distributed, the heat. Some parts will get higher temperatures and more Maillard reactions. In distilling, it creates flavours like maybe almond and a cereal type note. So that's something maybe we'll be on the lookout there. And then when it got to maturation, and I know you're waiting patiently, but in maturation back in the 1950s, Jameson was predominantly matured in ex-sherry casks. Probably around 25% of the casks were ex-sherry, and also hogshead casks. So the sherry butts were 500 litres capacity, and then the hogsheads I'm talking about were 250 litres capacity. So that was about 98% of your casks. 2% was American oak in 1971. So today that's flipped. Today we're using a lot more American oak. So I'll explain that in a moment. And just lastly, before I get on to tasting it, the type of warehouses we use today are airy and quite dry, whereas up in Bow Street, and it was traditional for a lot of the distilleries, they liked a damp warehouse, and a lot of these warehouses would have been underground in cellars in Dublin. So you had damp underground kind of warehouses, so that can have an effect on flavour, which maybe I'll, excuse me, maybe I'll explain as we get into the taste. So I'll invite you to maybe have a nose of this this quite old whiskey. So it would have been distilled in probably the 1940s. So it's quite distinctive and quite different from Jameson today. So you're getting that woody note. I mentioned the casks. I forgot to say that it's European oak casks predominantly, whereas today we're mostly American oak. And the European oak is a drier kind of a wood spice kind of flavour that it gives. So when you're nosing this, I'm getting that wood spice. If you get anything like nutmeg or maybe allspice, anything like that, that's coming from the European oak, I think. And then you might get there's this underlying kind of almost raincoat, slightly rubbery note, which you get with a lot of old whiskies. And that's basically because the cuts when they were distilling would have been much wider. So today we have more narrow cuts because we target that fruity, more floral flavour, whereas back in those days the cuts were wider. And that's why you get like almost this kind of oily, kind of workshop oily, kind of slightly rubber, but it's only slight. They did it quite well. As well as that, I get a kind of a slight toffee kind of note in there. I don't know if you get almond, but that almond goes back to the distillation because the Maillard reactions produce a compound called furfural, and furfural gives you that almond flavour. So if you get that on the taste as well, it's a bit bitter. So do you get a bitter almond on the taste when we get to that? Basically, when you're nosing this, it's not very oaky in the kind of oaky I mean now, like toasted oak that we're used to today. Because back then, and this was the case for all the distilleries really, from what I could see, is they used the casks over and over again. So literally, you'd have a cask, you'd fill it up. After the years, you empty it, you'd fill it up again and keep on going until they literally fall apart. And what we do nowadays is in Middleton, we bring the casks in, we use them 3 times for 3 rotations. After that, we sell the casks. Now, other distilleries buy the casks from us and they use them for a longer time. And some distilleries in other parts of the world still use casks until they fall apart. But we brought in that to get more wood flavour and more fresh wood flavour and those kind of toasted oak flavours in your Jameson that you'd have today. Nosing this, you might agree, it's very dry. There's almost kind of a licorice note in there as well. And definitely those wood spices, but it's not toasted oak that you'd experience, let's say, from a charred American oak barrel. We'll have a little taste anyway, see what you think. Schleinte.
Santé. Also, Eric, if I may, we're passing around the bottle. If you want to have a little picture and I guess have a smell directly from the bottle, it would be amazing for it to be returned so we can fill it with Jameson Original and sell it for an extortionate price in Paris. Thank you very much.
So on the taste, when you first brought it into the mouth, you might have got that oiliness. So this is something that we get from pot still, and it's from the unmalted grains. So it's nice to see that in such an old whiskey because we do talk about that today. But then it goes quite dry. It's the finish isn't as long, I suppose, as Jameson today. Quite spicy, you might notice that, and I think that's from the European oak. And it's quite good actually. It's clean, it's not, it hasn't got off flavors. But for me, the Jameson of today, like I might just actually compare it. This is it, I think. Like just nosing that straight away, it's got apples and kind of hazelnut. It's very, very fruity, as you might see. I'm just going to have a little taste. Schleinte again. And that characteristic smoothness for Jameson is in there, the oiliness. It's longer. The juice of the whiskey hangs around in the mouth. It's not as dry. And that's because it's a blended whiskey. This is single pot still, as we call it today, as in the Jameson from the 50s. But Jameson today is taking some of that pot still whiskey and blending it with whiskey that we make via our column stills. So the column stills, you might have gone through this, I'm not sure, but the column stills, we use corn or maize and some malted barley, and we make a very light style of whiskey. It's kind of sweet, it's fragrant, and a little bit floral. And what it does when you blend that in with the pot still is it makes it softer, it makes it smoother, and that's why you get that, that characteristic. Also, the casks that we use are far superior today than we ever did. There's a lot more science, there's a lot more knowledge now on maturation and on wood and the various compounds that you get from the wood. And I suppose when you're looking at what we use, American oak casks. Most of them will be ex-bourbon barrels, and they're quite new. They're made to a very high standard. We only purchase select casks. I wouldn't say that was the case in the past. You'd buy casks, any casks, wherever you can get them. We're very, very particular today. And secondly, we also get the casks from Europe. We want European oak casks. So that's what makes Jameson and Middleton Distillery different in a big way, in my opinion. Most of the ex-sherry casks nowadays are American oak. They were aged in American oak, and that's what you'd use, American oak that had been seasoned with sherry. We have specified, going back to the 1980s, that we want European oak, and it's really to go back to our heritage of Jameson. It was European oak seasoned with sherry, and the reason for that is the European oak gives you a different flavour profile. As I mentioned, it's drier, kind of more spice-driven, maybe walnuts, whereas American oak is kind of softer on the palate. You get more vanilla, more kind of maybe coconut, some kind of citrus kind of flavors, and maybe some orchard fruits. But when you put them together, you get more complexity again. And that's why we specify European oak for our sherry. And because we're bringing them, we get these built for us. It's under our specifications. Normally from northern Spain would be the forests and also maybe parts of France. And we send them down south. The staves are dried out down south, and then they're sent to sherry bodegas to be seasoned with generally Oloroso sherry, which is kind of walnut, a little bit sweet flavour. And then after 2 years of seasoning, they come to us. So we're getting really high quality casks. And the Jameson of today, you get that flavour. The distillate of today is cleaner. When I go back to Bow Street, you had that direct fired. You also would have had what's called a worm tub. And a worm tub is almost like a swimming pool. It would have been wooden, and you'd have your copper pipes, big copper pipes going through the worm tub, and that's how you cool your vapour coming off the stills. But that gives you a more meaty flavour profile and not as fruity. Whereas today we use shell and tubes, and shell and tubes are smaller, but they've got really small tubes. You get more surface to liquid contact with the cooling water on the outside, and you actually get a cleaner, a fruitier spirit. So that's another, I could go on and on, there's so many reasons. But when we built this new distillery in 1975, there was a lot of science, a lot of engineering know-how went in to try and take the best of the distillates from Jameson, what they make, and to remove some of those flavours that you don't want. I mentioned here about maybe the rubbery raincoat note in the background. Some of the whiskies back in the day had a kind of a burnt note. The reason for that is if they lost control of the still, those Maillard reactions will go crazy, and then you'll get that burnt note. So that's kind of some of the reasons, and I think it's amazing to compare and contrast and get an idea. And I'd leave it to the cocktail experts to maybe work out what way is best to use the old whiskey as opposed to the new whiskey. Maybe a Negroni for the old whiskey because it's a little bit bitter compared to today. Anyway,
thank you so very much.
Yeah.
How amazing! Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much. That was so cool. I'm terribly underprepared. How lucky are we? I think you compare a whiskey made 85 years ago to the whiskeys made today, and explained by Eric. How lucky are we? So again, Slanche, thank you very much, Eric. Really, truly inspiring. Merci beaucoup. Okay, cocktail stuff. The present, a generation of now. Cool. Well, I think, as Kat said, it's a very hard task to talk about today, but mostly I think that for us, the interesting thing to do in this particular chat was to look into a variety of debates that are happening now. And I don't know if it's just us talking, basically Nevsky and I, 5 a.m. arguing about anything, what is the right way of doing stuff, but I do feel like the exploration is very interesting. And I do think that I am unbelievably unqualified to talk about this because in all of our projects, like none of them are really in agreement, and we don't really know who we are. We just hide behind art movements, and then, all of the processes are different. But for us, what really sparked this debate was reading a variety of different pieces, and probably the leading one would be an article by an historian called Dave Wondrich that perhaps you've heard of. There was a Punch article called Why do my cocktail taste so weird? And I thought it was a great read, and really I encourage you to read it because it did feel like it was beautifully written, extraordinarily complete, and there was this idea of, okay, well, this is what was happening, and there was I to enter a bar. I have these challenges where my drink just tastes weird, and it looks weird, and it was something, and it was not that thing anymore, and I like Negroni, and I can get a regular Negroni, and everything is better. Of course, then one of the way to see this will be the rumbles of it was better yesterday, and of course, even at the age of 35, do you remember when it was better in 2007, and there everybody's the worst, and then 2007, people from 1998 were the best, and there's always this continuity. Nevertheless, what is interesting is that we are at the peak of, I guess, access to information. And today, this is the colossal difference between everything that Kat discussed and what we are talking there. When I say I'm going to talk about the present, it's impossible to tell you what's happening today. But for the past at least 2 or 3 years or 10 or 15 years, this idea of modern cocktail and this resurgence of cocktail is the thing that I will be mostly interested in today in order to understand actually what changed, and hopefully, then Dan is going to steal the show, telling us about what will happen tomorrow, right? Easy. Okay, as a little summary, so first, amazing Photoshop skills. This took me 45 minutes. But I think there's something that I find to be extraordinarily interesting is the reality of everything that Kat discussed. It wasn't for everybody, right? Cocktails were not accessible. Today, anybody can afford a cocktail. People can, if Jean was touching on this, right? I want to be affordable and you can enjoy a mixed drink. Also, back in the days, perhaps you'd be drinking spirit or beers or cocktails, but this will only apply to a very, very fragmental percentage of the population. And I think that this was really, really, I guess, interesting to explore. How does accessibility of cocktails has kind of changed the way that we drink? And for me, there's no better example than the fact that my mom is a huge mojito drinker. She's a huge drinker to start with. And I feel like the moment, my mom is not pictured here, by the way, the moment cocktails enter culture, there was a huge change. And this huge change can be seen, I guess, from a variety of different aspects, one of which would be an economical aspect. And to see that, unlike restaurants, where you to go and eat in Cork, I go to Andy's restaurant, it is likely that he will buy his butter from a guy, hopefully in Normandy, probably in Ireland, whatever. The reality is that his butter will differ than my butter and will differ than Jean's butter and you guys' butter. Whereas spirits are the same all around the world. You can have access to Jameson no matter where you are. You can have access to your spirits, to vermouth. And this is a global corporation. Whereas whenever it comes to food, they don't fight the same battle. There's a financial power to the idea of cocktails entering popular culture. And I did feel like this was a very interesting thing to explore, because the moment that in, I guess, this resurgence of cocktail 25 to something years ago, like, I guess, the top end of cocktails, but even in the 90s and 80s, you did have this. It was the moment where you could catch the spirit drinkers and you could catch the wine or beer drinkers and actually create this new form that generated a great amount of revenue, which is why we're here today, is because brands have the financial structure and power in order to be able to promote cocktails as a drinking art. And this is changing entirely the way that we've been drinking. In the Savoy in the 1930s, nobody could go. Nobody could afford to go. It wasn't a thing. Now, my mom can drink a mojito in a little bar in the south of France, and she will have access to this. There's this great argument to be made that cocktails were one of the first, universal language. And by this, I mean the fact that if you were to go in Puerto Rico and ask for a piña colada, it's called a piña colada. But if you go to Paris, you don't say it's a hot pineapple or an ananas show, right? Bloody Mary is not a Marie la Sanglante. You could actually travel the world having very little understanding of the language of the culture, but naturally, names of cocktails became a reference in a variety of different languages. And again, I guess Pina Colada and Bloody Marys would be a great example. Or Vieux Carré, right? All of these became a way that you could communicate. And this, I guess, superior class that had access to all this were able to actually interact and have traveled the world and have this stability that not only it's a luxury, but now I'm actually part of this universe, which is the Puerto Rican Pina Colada that you will have at the Ritz in Paris, and it will still kind of work. And I feel like this was somewhat super, super interesting, because it also meant that we, in this culture, with I guess, the traveling, if I want something today, I guess I order it on Amazon. I shouldn't, but I probably will. In reality, if you think about it, if it was to be 25 years ago, it was certainly not as accessible. So this is a little comparative. You have a menu from 1933 and a menu that we did in 2013 And I felt like this is something that was quite striking. Looking at all recipe books or all cocktail menus, you realize that a bad bar would have 20 products. I guess Kat touched on this, but in reality, out of a full cocktail menu that is quite complete, you're going to have 12 gin drinks, and they only use the same gin. And you're going to have 6 whiskey drinks, and they only use the same whiskey. You'll have 1 per category, and it wasn't exactly the case. And certainly today, one of the huge changes, I guess, is this accessibility once again. I really feel like this is the big word of what we're experiencing there, is that I have access to a variety of different things where in only this page, no ingredient is repeated, not even citrus. I think it's a crazy thing. It's wonderful to visit a country like Colombia, and it would be, or Mexico is a great example. Like it would be harder to find lemon than it would be to find lime. And I guess we don't even think about this. And to educate yourself into where products are coming from and what it means to actually be using things from around the world is certainly something that is interesting, because I feel, and again, this is 12 years ago, there was this excess of, okay, I'm going to use everything, and because I have access to it, whereas, again, it wasn't necessarily the case. Now, one of my favorite things is the fact, and I'm a big fan of this, is that places and people are specializing. And for this, it's a really big debate. And again, I have no answers, by the way, today, so I'm just going to keep on talking and asking more questions. But it's this idea of what is, what's the right way, or what is it to be a good bartender? Is it because you're capable of executing drinks completely on batch at a steady speed, or is it because you're being creative? What is the right definition of what it's like today to be a bartender? And what is it like to be the best bartender? Do you actually have to be shaking cocktails? Do you have to have the most amount of freezers? Do you have to invest your money into creativity? Is it in education? Is it in all of this? I don't really know. What I love is that this is from 1933. It's Frank Mayer's at the Ritz in Paris. And it's one of the first cocktail books I had, and I was really keen. For 5 years, I worked in an Irish pub called Johnny's Kitchen. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make a lot of cocktails, and I'm going to be a cocktail guy because they're all so cool, and I'm not cool because I'm just pouring pints and playing music. Little did I know that I was in the good old days. But the fun part about this book is there's a good 20% of it is actually recipes for sandwiches. And what I love is that the profession of a bartender was 100 years ago, 90 years ago. It wasn't only to execute drinks. It wasn't to talk about the bar house or to talk about whatever culture or community or all of the things that we are doing today. It was just to be able to serve people. And you were not a good bartender if you weren't able to execute very simple sandwiches. And I just do find this to be fascinating. There's great bits in this book that will talk about why a bar should or shouldn't have music. And maybe early on when Kat was talking and we were all doing our old-fashioned, there was a little opera of the ice in the old-fashioned, right? And I think that this was just so lovely because were you to visit a bar 100 years ago, there was this instant, or at least this intent in decision, that the sound of the ice dancing in the glass will be enough of the music, right? Today, does this mean that it's as central as the cocktail itself? Again, what is it like to be a good bartender? We have on the left-hand side, right-hand side, the Virgin Mary. I don't know if you heard of this. Actually, I didn't know Oisin would be here, but he's here. Have you heard of this bar, the Virgin Mary? It's a bar in Dublin. Dublin is famous for never drinking, right? So Oisin thought it would be a good idea to open the first non-alcoholic bar in the world in Dublin. And in this bar, you would not have any alcoholic beverages. And what I mean, by the way, that people and places are specializing is that there's room for literally everything. And a city you will associate with Jameson whiskey would start with music, with singing. Well, actually, there's room for a place that would serve only non-alcoholic beverages to thrive. Did he thrive? Moving on. Yeah, fair enough. I think that another great point, and this is why I got set up with all this wonderful stuff, is, I guess, the access to technology. And I love this because it's really what did you say? This is cake. This is the grand reveal. You cut it. What does it mean today to be a bartender? And again, I don't know, and I really please have conversations with you because I'm struggling with it at the moment to understand what's the right way of doing it. Is the idea that, okay, today, and this wasn't the case 15 years ago. This wasn't the case, I mean, for most of us at least, for anybody, it wasn't the case 25 years ago. How has this affected our role? And I think that it's also very interesting to listen to you from Jigger and Pony talking about your operation and your speed of service and how does batching come into play? How am I trying to affect, I guess, the liquid? How am I also looking to the fact that, because we're meant to be talking about cocktails, how am I meant to be looking at the fact that I have to believe that a Negroni, which is an equal part drink from 1919, yes, how am I meant to believe that the right balance is equal part? It is mathematically impossible that this is the best saturation of that drink. Equal part drinks is just a mystery, right? They're impossible because by nature, they cannot be perfect, right? And this is a very hard thing to understand. So how the rectification of little minute details can actually affect your drinks, and perhaps how is this making us worse bartender? I find this to be super interesting. Now, we were talking about this idea of what are classic drinks and why, what is a classic drink. For me, there's a very interesting case study, and I used to work in Paris in a bar called Little Red Door. And there's a guy that came in and he ordered a kangaroo kicker, right? So a young Remy bartender trying to impress, really wanted to be cool. I'm not going to say who he was, but he was a rather famous or popular bartender. And I didn't know what a kangaroo kicker was, right? So a little bit embarrassing. Do you guys know what a kangaroo kicker is? No? Well, you're as dumb as I am. I felt so inadequate, and then I was like, well, I don't know what it is. It's like, well, maybe you should learn how to do your job. Obviously, I've since then bought his bar, killed it. So kangaroo kicker is does anyone know? I have 10 points.
Absolutely not.
Vodka, martini. Vodka, dry vermouth, dash of orange bitters. Yeah. So you would argue that today it would go by a different name. Would that be like a vodka martini, perhaps? Yeah. No. What is the right way? If I'm a classic head and it's like, okay, so how do they differ? A gin martini, a vodka martini, I understand the difference. No. Am I okay to call it a vodka martini? Because a martini is only with gin. So again, this is what for me is interesting to talk with you today. We talk about classic and we have this idea that they have to be firm and they are planted into this idea that a Sazerac is a Sazerac and you cannot change that structure. Nevertheless, we just heard from Eric that the spirits are completely different. So when I open my Savoy cocktail book, actually, I don't taste the same spirit. So am I adjusting them? I also know the fact that the idea of producing a drink with complicated structures like 27.8 grams of vermouth to 30 grams of gin, this wouldn't have happened. Now the question is, would a Negroni have been different had they had access to this technology? But the most interesting thing is to think that all the classics were at some point innovation, right? They didn't arrive from whatever written in marble by God himself. There was things that people have made. And there was a point where somebody would have said, well, actually, a Negroni, oh no, I don't like this new stuff. Give me an old-fashioned. Right? And then whenever you are in an old-fashioned, I don't like this new stuff. I like punch bowls or whatever it was. And don't give me wine, I only drink mead. All of this new stuff doesn't work. I want the classic thing. And I feel like for us, this is just a presuppose, or at least a benefits of having an open mind is the idea that if you were to just think that everything at some point was the annoying new thing that all the classic heads were furious about, it's just like kind of reposition things. And I think that, of course, there are a lot of things that we can let go of, myself first. Nevertheless, this idea and this opportunity we have of being creative in our profession is also something that fundamentally changed. When you were a bartender 100 years ago, the conditions were different. I really doubt a moment like this would have happened 100 years ago. If anything, it's a great sign that what today, there's an optimism that comes with the quality of life we're able to have, the fact that maybe we'll get a day off, maybe we'll get 2 days off, I get 6 days off, maybe we can actually travel the world, discover spirits, talk to people, learn, I guess, connect and interact. And I feel like this is truly something that this industry is wonderful. Now, my little theory and the way that I would see and the way that I'm trying to organize, I guess, my menus, and again, I am responsible for talking about now for everybody. This is just in our case and a variety of places that I've worked at or visited, is I find that the best way to talk about a classic is to kind of look into a very simple tool that we certainly haven't created, but we use it a lot. And it's a little bit of understanding the separation between taste and aroma. It's my favorite thing to do. I do it a lot with kids, and it's a true pleasure, is to say, okay, well, the difference between a martini and a kangaroo kicker, or then became a kangaroo, is the aroma. Nevertheless, the taste is identical. It's the same ABV, right? It will have the same sugar content. It will have the same acidity, arguably, hopefully, the same temperature. It's the same glass, the same garnish. Everything is identical. Nevertheless, the aromas of gin differs than the aromas or lack of vodka. Does that make any sense? So I think that for us, is a Jameson Negroni a Negroni? Someone of these gentlemen would have been furious if you were to say, well, this is a Jameson Negroni. And he's like, well, isn't this like no, but Boulevardier is with rye, right? Bourbon. So actually, is a Boulevardier with, we don't even know. Sorry? It is a modern. And so for me, I just have a little game that I want for us to play, and if you don't mind, it's truly something I find interesting, and I will kind of tie it up. But for me, this is the difference. Taste will make the structures, and cocktails have evolved from being hard recipe that you have to respect. Whenever you realize that nothing was the same, not even the people making it, not even the spirits, not even the ice, not even the refrigeration, the glassware, everything has changed. When you allow a little bit of flexibility to it, understanding that these aroma structure is where you allow to be creative. So I've drawn a lot of little things for you today, and we have a little game. Can anyone describe pineapple to me? Sour. Sweet. Juicy. Spiky, fibrous. Okay, I'm taking all of these. Can anyone describe a passion fruit to me? Sour. Tropical. Sexy. Caribbean. Yeah. What else? Gooey. Okay, I'm taking all this. Beautiful. This is a mango, sorry. I started by doing a mango, then I did the eyes, then I fell in love with it. It's all weird. Can anybody describe a mango to me?
Cute.
Sexy. Sweet. On your backyard. That is really good thing to bring to collectivity. Caribbean. Okay, that's very interesting. I like what you're saying because, so if you were to talk about the reason why I'm bringing, I mentioned kids is because I'm the proud owner of a 10-year-old. And I have the true pleasure of being the father of a young 10-year-old called Zeta, who's just a great, as all kids are. I really encourage you. Is this kids propaganda? No, I have a 4-month-old as well, so it's my first time away from my family. I hate all of you. I don't want to be here. No, but really, truly, the fun thing is that how to explain to her what things are, and how am I responsible to create a vocabulary of which she'll be able to know and to create an entire library of information that she can actually taste of and be able to comprehend them. Unlike, literature, art, whatever, music, you told, okay, listen to Beethoven, and he uses silence like a musical note. It's incredible. And you're like, okay, that's why Beethoven is cool. Look at Mona Lisa. We don't know where she's looking, and that's why it's beautiful. So you're like, okay. I had no formal education on how to taste and smell stuff. And I really feel it's a disservice to kids that we are all collectively responsible for. Why aren't kids told how to articulate what they're experiencing when they're tasting things? Now, funny enough, this is not a room full of kids, this is a room full of adults. And we talked about pineapple first, right? Pineapple. And I was told sweet, sour, tropical, spiky, juicy. Now, and what else? Sexy. Beautiful. Okay, so sexy, I'm just not going to spend time with. I'm a married man, thank you very much. Okay, tropical. What does tropical mean? What's a tropical country? So, tropical is that you have 2 tropics, right? Capricorn and Cancer. Whatever's in between. Makes sense. Now, we use the terminology of tropical. Then, first of all, what does it mean? Is a tomato tropical? No? Where's the tomato from? Mexico. Right. So arguably, it's in between 2 tropics. Therefore, by definition, a tomato is tropical. The fact that we use it completely lightly, being like, well, it's tropical, meaning that maybe I had Oasis, Oasis stuff, Oasis tropical, and it's a combination of whatever, passion, banana, mango, and then you just like, well, this is my new definition. It is tropical. This is not what, in fact, tropical mean. Now, when you say spiky, this is fun, but this is going to be a cross-sensory description. I'm using the sense of touch to describe something that I'm tasting, right? Tasting and smelling, and I'm going to use a sense of touch. Now, there is types of acids that are going to give you this spiky feeling. Nevertheless, it's not spiky when you drink it. Passion fruit, we said it was tropical, and it was acidic, right? Sour. We didn't say sweet. Well done. Cool. Now, mango. Someone did say sweet. Mango, we said it was sweet, definitely, and it was sour as well. Right? Yeah. So the problem is we hear 128 grown adults that work in the industry of taste and flavor and aroma, and we are incapable of using actual precise words to describe things that we experience, because I know for a fact that a pineapple differs to a passion fruit and it differs from mango. Would you agree? Yeah, so why are we focusing on certain aspects of the description that are going to be usually associated with what, again, we call taste? What you have in front of you are three, it's a little experiment that we do. I work alongside Marie in a bar in London, and we have a lot. The bar is based on the school. I promised myself I wouldn't say Bauhaus, but I already did. Exactly. But for us, we have this really, it's actually one of Maria's leading projects, is how do we talk about taste, and how, when we started as a small bar, and we have over 20-something collaborators, young people, we finish very late, there's a lot of things happening. How do we actually talk about what we do and taste? And we found out that this little experiment was very helpful. So in front of you, you're going to have 3 glasses. They should be number 1, 2, 3. Or as we say, 1, 2, 3. Someone say Shakira. Beautiful. As the glasses are being delivered, do you guys all have number 1 in front of you? Lovely. Please, can you taste number 1? Okay, can somebody describe to me what's happening in glass number 1? Sorry? Okay, well, no. Yes. Sorry? It is, in fact, a hydrosol, but what's happening? Describe it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. What's a hydrosol? Okay, so it's in the family of hydrosols, but what's happening? What are you actually tasting? So is it flavored water or is it aromaed water? What are we? Do you guys know what you guys know what you're experiencing? Do you know what ingredient it is? So it is a lime distillate. So fun. In your lime distillate, you're going to have, I guess, 1 part of the lime. Then you guys got given glass number 2. Can you taste glass number? Be mindful, we're tasting limes, so just don't shot lime juice. Sorry? Sweeter, yeah. I think a tart part of the sweet tart, yeah, yeah. Interesting. So would you? Yeah, exactly. But I think it's fun because for a kid, you'd be like a tartness is some. Maybe my English is obviously it's my second language. Tart is something that I associate with like rhubarb or like an apple, right? I would say sour. No, what's tart? Yeah, but what kind of sourness is it? Âpre. Merci, Madame Dupont. Well, interestingly enough, out of these 2 glasses, could someone tell me here which one is lime? Was it number 1 or number 2? Number 2, we said? Okay, well, our argument, and I feel like whenever it comes to this separation, and I will try and link this back to the subject at hand. Our argument is that you don't have lime if you don't have a combination of number 1 and number 2. And I think making its way to you is a glass labeled number 3, which is going to combine this number 1 glass and number 2. If the first glass is a distillate of fresh lime juice, the second glass is actually a recomposition of the natural acids you're going to find present in lime. So you're going to get your malic, your citric, you're going to get your succinic, your ascorbic. You also have a little bit of fructose. You have the things that are naturally present. Our argument is to say that whenever we describe cocktails, we should be able to touch on both. Right now, how is this interesting for us when we go back to classics? Is the fact that we're going to argue, my argument today is this, and please feel free to disagree. I'm the one with the microphone anyway. Is that taste, whatever you had in your second glass, is going to be your classic. I have my Negroni, and suddenly my Negroni, I'm allowed to use aroma, which is what you had in your first glass, in order to build on top. So basically, my martini and my kangaroo cocktail taste identical, but differ in their aroma, meaning that their flavor is different and they are, in fact, a different drink. And I do feel like this terminology and using this in today's world actually works. Whenever you had a Boulevardier and Negroni were different 50 years ago, today you'd be like, well, I'm having a Jameson Negroni, And it's not necessarily called a boulevardier because they work. These families of drinks have entered a common language, and therefore they can actually be used for what they are, which is families. And these taste structures on which we're allowed to build aromas become the creative outlet that we have. Make sense, kind of? Sure? No, pas du tout? Cool. Again, this is my little reminder for myself and for the kids is that whenever you taste stuff, try and have the separation between taste and aroma, and then understand that the both of them together make flavor. And in modern cocktails, is the flavor that might differ, but the taste structures oftentimes repeat themselves, even though they will have margin modification, right, or like iteration of classic structure. Because it's also the hard thing whenever we're making drinks today. How can we be innovative in a world where all classic structures have somewhat been invented, right? And there's a reason why they are classics is because the taste structure work. But now, with the access of product, with the access of technique, are we allowed to actually build aromas on top of these tastes? So I don't believe there's innovation in the present when it comes to taste. I do believe the innovation comes into aroma. Sorry, that was my only point, 45 minutes. Now, I think to close up my part, because I'm slowly running out of time, there's a little bit of a fun little experiment I've done, and it's the final thing that I would like for you guys to taste, which is a drink called a Cameron's Kick. Cameron's Kick. Anyone know what's a Cameron's Kick? And you knew also the... Guys, if you can send the 2 cocktails as well. Well, I love this, and this is a really fun thing. So what we've done is not unlike what Kat has proposed before. I don't have anyone to shake. I don't want anyone to come and steal my thunder any more than Eric did. But what I did is I went back into the cellar at Barnevaux, and I find scotch from the 70s, right? So what we're going to drink is made from a scotch from the 70s. It is respecting exactly the Savoy specs, which are, do you know the specs, the original specs? So what are the original specs in 1930 Savoy cocktail book of a Cameron's Kick? So it's one third is going to be Scotch whiskey, 1/3 is going to be Irish whiskey, 1/6 is orgeat, 1/6 is lemon. Now, if you were to have made drinks in your life, you'd be like, this shouldn't work, right? It should come across as too sweet. Like I would say, I would probably need to, especially thinking that orgeat, by the way, is not a vintage. Right, so just so you know, and lemon, it's not from the 1930s as well, in this instance. But the spirit itself is a style that Tony was kind enough to find for us, which is the most delicious thing in the world. It's a style of whiskey that would have mimicked the way whiskey was made in the 1930s. So you had, after everything that Eric says, I couldn't really pinpoint exactly the details in the distillation process that led to this change. Nevertheless, you're going to have a very oily style of Irish pot still plus, I guess, blended pot still whiskies, which mimics the way that it would have tasted 100 years ago. And so what you are going to try is the original recipe that by nature is probably going to be off balance, and then I allowed myself to make a bit of a different recipes using Jameson from today, right? Then the problem is I didn't want to use any other Scotch whiskey because, you know, Scotch whiskey is gross and we all know it. So what we've done is that I have distilled lapsang in order to find, I guess, my smoky element to it. And then I've used honey, I guess, to get that honey flower elements that you get in Scotch. And I've just rebuilt my drink exactly the same. Now, the fun thing is that the 2 glasses you've got about to have in front of you have the same bricks and the same pH, right? They are as sweet as they are sour. If you were to taste them, it's the same. The ABV is superior in the old recipe, but it's marginal. And the only thing that we've changed is that we added a bit of fat as a texture. So I'm using yogurt because I certainly have a passion for yogurt drink. And I think that this will be a fun thing for you guys to try comparatively, as they should be making their way. In the meantime, I have 5 minutes exactly, and I really wanted to take some questions from you. Yes, Dan?
Do you think that by simplifying the language, like you just mentioned, the Negroni, Boulevardier, the whiskey, and the Jameson Negroni, takes away from the cultural significance of those names linguistically? So a Negroni means something to the Italian culture. By calling something a Jameson Negroni, like erases all of that meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm not worried for the Italians. I see what you mean. I think that they certainly. So this is a very complete topic that I'm brutally uneducated on. But the idea of, I guess, like cultural appropriation and to see My partner is from Caracas, Venezuela, no? And I love to lie about my friends, right? So her mom used to make Juarepita. Juarepita was my Venezuelan, okay. Right, apparently you make your local spirits with like a variety of different juices, and this is how I pretend my wife started her career. Now, this is basically a gin and juice. I would find it annoying that people will call this gin and juice if you were to be in Caracas, Venezuela, because there's a certain afflection and cultural weight to this. Now, I think that this is already happening whether we want it or not, because we presuppose, perhaps the 128 of us in this room today, that people need to have education to have a drink. And I really can't afford to just welcome fancy bartenders that know all their classic. I think that people are naturally doing this, that you'll have a mezcal Negroni instead of calling it whatever, Oaxacan something, right? I don't know what's the official name for it. And I do think that culturally also, the significance of this classic, as you say Massachusetts old-fashioned, right? That's when you muddle the orange? Wisconsin, sorry. Do they call this a Wisconsin old-fashioned in Wisconsin? Yes. Yeah? Okay, well, that really defeats my point, so say no. What I mean to say is that these things are naturally, there are multiple names for the same drink. And this would be a cultural thing. So what would you call, the problem is Negroni is entered now. If you wanted to be the one that would like, all the drinks would be named after you, you just had to be better, I guess. It's the natural selection of cocktails, right? The ones that survive are the good ones. There's a reason why we don't drink Archangels, because it's gross. Right? No? Maybe? Thank you very much.
Archangel?
There is a question from the slider.
Yeah.
How would you describe the taste of the passion fruit?
How would I describe the taste of a passion fruit? Of a pineapple. Wax, lilac. I would say it has got that, what would you say, like a pâte fleurie kind of cheese, no? My cheese knowledge dropping it like this. I would say it would have this canned peach aroma, perhaps. Now, obviously, I'm only doing step one because I'm a cretin, but was I to be a bit more educated, I would actually tell you, well, this is Limoen that combined with the E72 Rosaen that will create this kind of aromas. But I think that naturally, I'm not at the stage now where I can talk about molecules. I can only talk about, I guess, the organoleptic composition of stuff is, for me, at the moment in my career, just based on memories and things that I know. So do you know when you have this fake peach, if you make a pêche melba in your first job, you open the thing? Well, I would say this is an aroma that is somewhat reminiscent of a pineapple. Then I would say that there are these really weird, like, kind of like ultra strong, like, floral notes in the mead nosings or drinking, which I would associate with lilac. Maybe I say it's complete nonsense. Nevertheless, I was able to give you 4 things rather rapidly, but I don't know. Does that make sense? No? Yeah. Do you mind if I take Indra first? Indra.
Thank you for splitting the aroma versus taste.
At your service.
Where does something like mouthfeel or texture in beverage comes into play? How does it fit?
That is a great question, but because we have 1 hour, I'm not doing this. For us, it's more. So texture is very interesting because actually the 2 drinks that you're about to taste, there is this significant difference. For me, I would add the idea that like texture and mouthfeel probably are going to be, so mouthfeel would be the sensation where texture is the fact of what's happening, right? So for us, texture is going to be more in terms of like the resonance of the aroma and the way that you bring them out. So I guess that texture will be the platform on which you want your aromas to dance. Maybe? Does that make sense? Do you mind if I take Sean first? Yes, Sean.
So you really underscored today the lack of vocabulary to describe flavors, right? Which I think is a disservice to the guest, deciding between 2 $20 cocktails.
Yeah.
As a practical matter, if you were to work at a bar and you only had pre-shift with staff, how would you increase your vocabulary? What exercises or what tools would you use to bring the bar team along to better describe the drinks?
This is a great question. For us, the way that we try to do is to first, I don't believe that bars are the right places to get education. And I think that anybody that is kind enough to spend $20 in any of my bars, anyone that is kind enough to walk through the door and spend money with us, we should speak their language and they shouldn't have to learn ours. I feel like there's an inadequacy that you experience when you walk into, I find cocktail bars to be terrifying. The last thing I need is to be made to be unintelligent or to be made to feel like I don't belong. And I do feel like this is more something to do with our kids or for us to be able to communicate. And it's true now that we have all these different bars in different parts of, at the moment it's only continental Europe, I guess, but no, not even Europe, I guess. Merci. But the problem is, if I'm in New York trying to open a bar and I have an emergency and I need to call Kenny to be like, can you make this drink? Him and I need to be able to speak the same language. The same way that people have done in coffee for years, or they've been doing in wine. Why don't we have this particular language, and why are we always focusing on taste? And I do think that this education that comes from the composition, it's important for us to communicate internally. Nevertheless, I would never put this upon the staff to be like, well, actually, pineapple is like lilac, you dweeb. I think that this is not what you want. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, because I'm not sure personally, and as a bar owner and as a bar manager, are you a fan of classic cocktails?
I love them. I love classic cocktail, but the thing is, again, I'm not sure what a classic is. Kat made a great point. Is it because it's published? And then it means like, how long do you need? I haven't seen the exact documentation of how long does a cocktail have to be published in order for it to become a classic. Does it need to be popular? Which one does it need to be? And how is there any definition to it beyond the fact that it's a drink that is being ordered? And for me, the difficulty into this is that I understand, for me, classic is incomplete whenever you say classic. Is it a classic culturally? Is a Fernet and Coke a classic? Well, perhaps it is in Argentina, but it isn't in France.
When you order a Negroni anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
what do you expect? Like a twist, or what it's known as a classic?
So if I was to order a Negroni, 100% I would expect something that I associate with a classic in terms of taste. Now, was there to be an addition of aroma into it? I wouldn't hate it. But now, usually, and I hope that this is the case for everybody, it really rarely happens to me that I order classics and people would say no. So if I want an old-fashioned, they're like, well, you need to try fancy rum something, and it's sometimes yes and sometimes no. But at home, for example, I would only have classics because I'm tired of all this fancy stuff, you know. And thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, we were talking about past, present. What about the future? I mean,
Do you see? I hear accidentally.
Yes, sir.
You might not have time to actually answer this, but and maybe others can chime in.
This is beeping red, by the way. Please, no, please. As long as Tony doesn't physically move me, I am going nowhere.
Other than having an argument, a friendly argument with your co-peers, what is the best way to decide a classic or a modern classic, other than, oh, I know the bartender who created the drinks, as in the specs?
Could you ask?
There's so many versions or different books that say you make this drink this way or this drink that way, and it's the same. Same drink.
no, do it.
Okay, it's the same fucking drink.
Yeah.
But it's just made in a different book like
Yeah.
2 years later. So, what is the best way? For me, I found just making different specs with friends.
Yeah.
And coming up with the best version.
Well,
Again, that's not the classic.
But the problem is that when we're talking about senses, right? And I guess tasting drinks is it's even though there is the perfect drink, it's something that we'll never get. Is that like, I guess the idea of participation, like Plato's idea of participation, right? We can only try and collaborate to the idea of the perfect old-fashioned, right? And I do think that from an academical background myself, I would say is the oldest one wins, right? So the first publication, this becomes the classic on paper. Now, this doesn't mean it's the one that I want to have. Does that answer your question? So oldest, but ultimately best wins. Yes, sir, you had a question?
So a little bit more, going back into the words and the terminology, going back basically into language, let's put it that way. We here in the industry, we have our own set of languages, let's put it that way. And that also ties into what the airline just said over here, on the different specs of the cocktails. We all speak, let's say, a 2-1-1 ratio, or 2-1.5.
Yeah.
We all know that 2 ounces the base, 1 is going to be the juice, and then half is going to be the sweet. And that also, how can we use that language, if you have an idea, right, to use it as a base or starting point to develop that hospitality to our guests, and then understand that, and how can we transfer that information to our guests, making them hospitable at any setting?
Yeah. So I think this is way above my pay grade. I have no idea to answer it. I think it somewhat goes with Sean's question. I don't believe I have no answer to this. I do believe that education is naturally happening. So my best advice, like in most things in life, is like patience will certainly be your friend. And you understand that people already, I'm 35, I'm very young, right? Yes, Remy. the drinking habits and I guess the ordering habits have evolved. People are ordering in a lot more from like a point of view of education. I think the main point that for me I want to carry over is that I wish I had the assiduity and the business mind or the procedures perhaps that you were discussing today. For me, one of the huge focal points in terms of I guess goals, whether we call them I guess value/goals, is the fact that we need to be able to create a language in which we can communicate. And for me, it's more the fact that always my background is in philosophy, right? The worst thing, the reason why people argue is just they're using different definition for the same thing. And if I'm talking about love and you're talking about love and we don't have the same definition, we're just going in circle. For us, our fundamental thing and the point of today's conversation between Kat, Dan, and myself is to discuss the idea of cocktails. How can we talk about cocktails if we don't use the same word, if we don't say the same definition? No, the problem is we are talking first with our senses and we forget the most optimistic, beautiful thing about nature is that it's by its essence extraordinarily inconsistent. So no lemon tastes the same. So how can I create the combination of all the lemons I have? Well, it doesn't really matter because on one side, and again, I do feel like this is what's happening there, is that we have the tools to be able to understand that lemon, on average, would have a Brix of 2.3, whatever, pH of 2.3. All of this, we're able to actually talk from it from a mechanical perspective when it comes to taste, and we have the tools to understand through a variety of different methods the organoleptic composition of it. So this creation of this language for me is what should be happening now. And again, the idea is not for me to say this taste aroma thing is the right way. I just know that this is the way that we've chosen to do it, and it's something that we can say we're somewhat thrilled or proud or whatever is the way to say it. We're happy that we have a system when we talk about the description of drinks, and we talk the same language, and already I think that's awesome. And this is certainly what I'm trying to give to my daughter. And now, thankfully, I've made a fresh one just to have start even earlier, to be able to see how it will affect. Yeah, I didn't exactly. She's AI generated. Exactly. Yes, Tony. Time-wise, one more question. Do we have a good question over there? Amazing. Have you guys? So I'll go to you because. But can we first? Have you had both your cocktails? Is it good? Oh God. It's boozy as hell, no? Okay, fair enough. Well, the past is better. Let's all die. I think for me, sorry. By the way, great work on my end. I think that this is the last thing I want to talk about, what's happening there. And I do feel like this is a great platform to actually discuss something, is that our profession, I feel like this is truly a message, or at least the way I see it, is certainly a message of hope, is that unlike professionals 25 years ago or 30 years ago, we have the opportunity to have a job evolve. There's people today whose job I don't understand. If I was to be talking to bartenders 50 years ago, well, what you do is you work 6 days a week. Jean is a farmer. I know he's being cool about it, but Jean is a farmer, Maria makes sandwiches, Giorgio is the first bartender to create his own line of glasses. Little do we know, this is my business partner and collaborator, Adrian. He's talking at Le Louvre about cocktails, and he's pairing cocktails with, so this is at the Louvre Museum, and we have this continued partnership. And we get to talk, imagine, we make cocktails, we bar people, and we serve people, and we clean the toilet, and we do all this. I mean, I don't clean the toilet. This is obviously a joke, by the way. And we have the opportunity to talk, to interact and to be in front of timeless pieces of art and to talk about actually how we would transpire to an aromatic journey if you were to have this non-alcoholic or alcoholic. And I do feel it's awesome. I make clothes. Where's my qualification to make any clothes? You've seen my sense of style. This is going nowhere, right? But actually, out of my profession, this idea of this little side quest, I love this because my thing was okay, I want to live in a world where I can make my clothes and make my glass and make my plates, and I'm completely self-dependent, right? I have this really weird idea that this is my goal, and it will be in Normandy with the Impressionism. It's going to be great. We all live together in the same house. This is awesome. Yeah. Nah. Yeah. Nah. What I love. And I think this is an example. We had the pleasure to be joined for the past 3 years to the second best sets of hosts that we had here at Jameson Hosts, and Anna Sebastian was one of them, right? Second best, I said. Anna is using her platform as a host at the Savoy to then being the bar manager, basically my employee at the Artesian, to actually impart change within, I guess, gender equality in the bar industry. Whether she does it the right way or the wrong way, nobody can argue that the message is wonderful. I think that, in fact, we are now instrumental into the change of, and we have the opportunity to shape tomorrow's industry at a pace that was never done before. And we go back to this idea of what's happening now, is that we have access to information, we have access to communication. I'm not even going to touch on, social medias and the power of the fact that people have now a microphone and they're allowed to talk about what's happening. And I do feel like this is what's happening now, is that some people, like Maria, is using a platform to make sandwiches. Some people like Anna are changing the world, obviously. No one is right. Or with a baguette 3000, of course. But I do think that this is really wonderful. And in our profession, what's happening now is that we have the opportunity. My mom called me saying she saw one of my glasses in Emily in Paris. That's a TV show. And she was like, oh my God, like this is my son. She will go and see the neighbor. Look, he's done this. And I have zero qualification to do anything. And I do find this to be amazing. We have this tool as bartender, right? Cool. Tony, am I super late? This is beeping so hard. Les amis, thank you so very much for your time and patience today.